What is up, everybody? Josh Tapp here again, and welcome back to the Lucky Titan podcast. And today we have Terry Jones with us here. And honestly, this guy, if I were to spout off his entire career, it'd be about a mile-long description of who he is. But really, the big highlights of who he is this guy has spoken in over 30 countries, had over 500 speaking engagements. He built 5 startups, 2 of which IPO'd at $1 billion. You don't get to that kind of success without really knowing what you're doing. And one of the parts that really inspired me to bring him on was to come and talk about innovation, especially in today's ever-changing markets. And in the bootstrapping space, a lot of us, I think, are kind of risk averse. We're trying to make sure that we're very safe. But what I'd really like to talk to Terry about today is how we can leverage all of that to really scale our companies and or pivot them, as you all know. So Terry, with that intro, say what's up to everybody, and then we'll move on into the interview.
Well, great to be with you today. I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk to your audience.
I'm really excited to have you here. So, I just in our pre-interview, you already spouted so many good pieces of knowledge. I'm like, I've got to hit record. People are going to miss this. So I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit on a couple of those pieces. And the very first question I have for you is about pivoting. As one of the founders of Travelocity, and honestly, if you haven't heard of that brand before, I'd be very, very surprised because they've been such a successful company. How were you able to pivot Travelocity successfully? That's the big first question.
Well, we were pretty nimble. When we started, we had hardly any competition. There weren't any other online travel agencies. And then, of all things, Microsoft, the largest IT company in the world at the time, launched Expedia. So there we are fighting Expedia, and we were terrified that they were going to build travel into the browser, because they were building many services in. So we went out and had to do big deals with Yahoo and AOL and others to try to combat that. And interestingly, the airlines looked at these 2 giant companies, American Airlines, who own Travelocity, and Microsoft, and they said, we don't want 2 giant travel agents. So they immediately cut commissions from 10% to 8%. So that hurt, right? And so we moved into cruises and tours. And then they cut commissions from 8% to 5%. And we went into telephone sales and said, look, we're getting all these people into the business, but we're not closing them all because they're afraid to book online. It's a long time ago. And so we said, hey, here's a phone number, right? Call us. And that helps. And we kept building our base. And then after 9/11, travel fell 70%, almost like today. And the airlines took that opportunity to cut all travel agent commissions to 0, nothing. And so our biggest revenue over a period of 2 years had gone to 0. We instituted a service fee. We made other changes. But what had happened was, by that time, we had 40 million customers. And there's a great quote that says, the battle is over if the startup gets the distribution before the incumbent gets the innovation. And that's what happened here. So we had a huge business in hotels and cruises and tours, and we went public for $1.2 billion. And the fact that airlines weren't paying anything really didn't matter. We got back-end fees from the reservation systems, and we grew giant businesses. So we had to change and continuously evolve, and our competitors weren't. American Express and Carlson Wagon Lee, the 2 largest travel agencies in the world, never went online. They didn't get it. In fact, I ran the American Express site for a while, which is nuts. They outsourced to me. It's like Target outsourcing to Amazon. So if you can change and pivot through strength, not through fear, that's always going to happen. I've done 5 startups. I've been on 19 boards. Everybody pivots. Look at IBM, 100-year-old company. As a CIO, obviously very close to them. They invested in my last company. They just pivoted again at 100 years and are trying to become a cloud company, and I bet they'll succeed.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that concept because, really the baseline of that is you had 40 million customers who still needed a service provided to them. You just had to find a monetization strategy that worked well for your company, is what it seemed like.
Right. Exactly.
And that's,
Exactly.
yeah, that's a
And
beautiful process.
and monetization is always changing. Look at the airline business. Most of the money they made in the last 5 years was for charging you for things that used to be free: baggage, change
Right.
fees, food, right? And people complain about it, and it's a terrible thing to change a customer that way. But hey, they all went bankrupt, so they had to do something.
And it's kind of funny to see that happen. I think people are, the consumers averse to it, but because it's there, they kind of have to, right? It's like the theaters and the snacks, right? They're already there. You can't bring in your own food, so let's charge for it.
Well,
For our
and it
business
is hard to
model.
change a business like that. I mean, if you go to Home Depot and don't get a clerk to serve you, that's kind of okay.
Yeah.
If you go to Neiman Marcus and you don't get a clerk, you're really upset. So nobody's mad at Southwest for not having food, but everybody's mad at Delta for not having food because they used to have it. So it is hard to pivot, but eventually, the customer will come around.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I want to ask you this question just in the context of or our listeners, the people who are listening here. Most of them are B2B service providers. And
Right.
a lot of them are at the $1 million point and they're really struggling. And it's because they can't grow it. They feel like they can't grow it. So they're looking at other opportunities. So they either pivot or start a new company. In your opinion, do you feel like that's way too early to even pivot, or do you feel like it's okay to pivot that early?
No, I mean it's okay to pivot, but if you've got a great business, I mean the first thing you do is say, why can't I grow beyond this rate, and what's happening? And a lot of B2B companies are changing dramatically. I was making a speech to a very large electronics distributor, and I was riding in the van to the dinner, and I'm talking to the guys. This 3-4 years ago. So, what's your biggest problem? They said, we can't call on the purchasing agent anymore. He or she is working out of their house in their pajamas. We have to have a new strategy. So, that was pretty insightful to me, saying before COVID, hey, we have to deal with these companies electronically. B2B companies have been slow to move to e-commerce. They've been slow to move to portals. They've been slow to move to using these tools. I mean, now, we're seeing people who flipped in a week to using Zoom. And in one of the companies I'm on the board of, a large company, $1 billion, they're saying, hey, our travel cuts are going to be permanent because we used to send a salesman and a sales engineer to every sales call. The engineer is going to be on video. We're not sending them anymore. We're going to save a ton of money. And yeah, maybe the salesperson has to still go out and glad handle people, but we can do this a different way. And so I think B2B has gotten a kick in the head, particularly during COVID, to say we can change. We don't have to sell the old way. And the ones who are selling the new way are doing just fine. And we also look at our business and say we can accelerate our speed of decision making. Having worked in large corporations, I use an example of a pinball machine in terms of how companies make decisions. You launch your idea out there, and the first two flippers are maybe marketing and sales. This is a dumb idea. We could never sell it, right? And then it's manufacturing, and customers say, well, we couldn't fix it. We can't build it. We couldn't fix it, right? And then if you get through all those flippers, you get down to the big ones, which are, of course, finance and legal, which kill every idea. And what we've seen during COVID is companies making decisions way faster. Companies like IBM and others are saying, hey, we don't ask permission anymore. We just make the decision. Best Buy had an 18-month plan to get to curbside delivery. They did it in 2 days. So, the boss won't forget that. But that's the speed of business today. And so if you're about to pivot, I would reassess everything about your business and how can I use new technology and new business models to accelerate my current business. Now, obviously, if that doesn't work, then you can say, well, I need either to add new lines of business or pivot. But hopefully, in pivoting, you keep the best part, whether it's your unique manufacturing capability, your unique supply chain, your customer base, something, because a pivot isn't starting over. A pivot is using everything you have to go somewhere new. I'll give you an example. Philips, the lighting company, just went to Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam and said, instead of selling you guys light bulbs, we want to sell you light. They said, what? They said, well, we want a contract to light the airport for 20 years, which they got. Well, they immediately put in bulbs that last longer, bulbs that use less power. They're paying for the power, and they recycle the bulbs at the end because, hey, they're paying for them. So instead of selling iron, they're selling an outcome. Honeywell's done the same thing, moving from sensors that sense when an air conditioner goes down to a service that says it'll never go down. We put in backup and we automatically dispatch. Much more profitable business model. So they use their assets to move upstream into a better business model. That's another way to do it.
And you're a marketing expert too. I didn't realize that, Terry. I mean, the position.
Well, you don't build companies without marketing. So
I love that. Well, I mean, I really love that perspective. I mean, there's so much, I would say, fear around pivoting and taking risks in a company, especially at these early stages. And
right.
I mean, that's something that we were talking about pre-interview that I really love.
It's really the biggest thing I talk about in my book, Disruption Off. I really emphasize that companies lose out with the future because they stop taking risk. Risk gets driven out of companies, and boards are about controlling risk. And I'm on a lot of boards, and with the cyber committee and the audit committee, it's all that don't take risk. You have to take risks. No, you don't have to take huge risks anymore, because hey, I can test with 3D printed prototypes, right? I can test with AI prototypes on the web if it's a web product. There are all ways to test small, but we have to realize it's not an experiment if you know the outcome. So, you can't say, well, this is going to work. I have to do an experiment, and I'm going to fail most of the time. Look, you're an awesome baseball player if you fail 70% of the time. So that's true with startups. 75% of startups fail. So why would your idea work, Mr. Corporate America? It won't necessarily. So get used to failure, but kill projects, not people. It's the idea that failed. It isn't Terry. Now if I fail all the time, you're going to send me to the minors. I get that. But mostly it's the idea that failed, the execution. And I'll use another sports analogy. Why do teams watch game films so incessantly? Not to assess blame, but to ensure victory, right? I learned from my failure. We're going to learn how to do that play better, or we're going to throw that play out and never do it again, right? Whatever it is. So I think it's building a culture of experimentation, getting people who understand the business can change. We want it to change. And that's up to the leader to create that culture of experimentation continuously and change. And the tension there is you have to run the marathon and the sprint. The marathon is running the business you got. The sprint is creating the new stuff. And you have to do both. And it may take a different group of people to do both those things. But that's how you have to adapt and adopt to the changes in the world today.
Well, and I think that's so applicable right now. I mean, we're watching this happen in real time as people who are slow to make decisions and slow to take risks are gone in 3 to 6 months. And it's kind of sad right now to see people relying on like government bailing them out of it when they could literally, like you're saying, take some risks, make some strategic decisions in your company, and it will help you to change. I mean, for us, we had to make a huge pivot in order to really make sure that we were okay during the coronavirus and actually thrive during it. It sounds like a lot of the companies you've been working with.
And me too. Look, I'm a public speaker the last 15 years. Part of what I do, all of a sudden the speaking business closed. So I built a studio here in my office. I bought really advanced technology because I realized immediately my competition is television. If I'm going to be on Zoom like this, I have to be able to change the scene immediately, right? And suddenly there's my books behind me, or I don't want to be that little Zoom guy in the corner. So I've got a very sophisticated TV studio here where I can put myself anywhere on the screen, and I'm doing interviews, which I never did during a speech before. I'm doing polling, right? I'm using lots of video, and the speeches are much shorter because attention span is slow, is short. So I had to revitalize my business. I did 45 online speeches. I was in Saudi Arabia and Outer Mongolia on the same day. I couldn't have done that before unless I had an F-35 jet, right? So we all have had to pivot, and that's healthy. Now, I think we have to look at the world and say, what are the permanent changes that COVID has made? Because we generally don't go back. TSA didn't go away 20 years after 9/11. Still there, right? So some of these changes, contactless shopping, the rise in e-commerce, 40% of consumers have changed either a brand or the way they shop during COVID. Oh, where'd they go? We need to be there for them. I mean, Instacart hired 350,000 people. Meetings are all going to be hybrid going forward. There aren't going to be any meetings that are just in person. They're all going to be hybrid, I believe. And hotels got to be ready for that. So car dealers, have fought Tesla like crazy. Tesla can't sell in 19 states because the car dealers made it illegal for Tesla to sell. Well, guess what's happening now? In all those 19 states, the car dealers are beating on the door of the legislature. We want to sell online because they figured out it worked during COVID. And it's the only way they can do it. So I think now is the time to make the change you were wondering about and test it out, see if it works.
I hope those words resonate in your ears. I mean, that's that's no bigger wisdom than that in this interview. I mean, think about you've been holding off on these projects for maybe years for some of you. Right now is the time to do it. I mean, it's so easy to make those transitions right now because the world is more accepting, I felt like. And
yeah, and we have so much new technology. My book Disruption Off talks about 10 new technologies that are coming. And you think about telemedicine and how quickly that's changed, and there are hundreds of thousands of telesessions going on. Well, that was illegal before. It's okay now. I have a friend in Chevy Chase, Maryland. He called up for grocery delivery, and he came in a drone, like a wagon that just drove down the street. The grocery guy just bought a dozen drones and says, nobody's going to stop me. It's COVID. And he did it. And it's working great. He's making great money. GE just got the first 3D printed engine part approved by the FAA. Well, you think about how that was made before. 5 guys made a sub-assembly, sent it to an assembler, went in a warehouse, eventually went on a boat and a truck to GE. Now, GE can do it all in-house. They get a part that's cheaper, lighter, faster, stronger. And what happened to the boat, to the customs broker, to the trucker, to the sub-assembler? They're gone. So better to be the disruptor. Because look, the difference between disruption and innovation, they're just two sides of the same coin. The only reason you call it a disruption is because you didn't do it. If you did it, it would be an innovation. But it's this damn disruption. These guys are attacking me. Well, on the other hand, you'd be, I'm so innovative. I did it, and I blew all those guys away. So, it depends on your attitude to the world. And you can make old things new. Think about who ever thought people would subscribe to razors, right? $1 billion business, right? Direct to consumer mattresses. I mean, people just looked at an old business and thought about it in a new way. And that's what you have to do today is look at how these technologies and business models are being deployed in other industries and say, I could do that. I could blow up the mattress business.
yeah. And I love those examples because we see those a lot in product businesses. But I think what people haven't realized is that it's been happening so quickly with, education and with, information products and with B2B service. Businesses, they're changing so rapidly right now. And I love to see your pivot. There were so many speakers. I interview a lot of speakers, and a lot of them will come on and they're just, I'm just kind of waiting until we can go back and speak again. I go on podcasts and stuff, and you're just like, wow, you don't get it. Tony Robbins
No,
had an event with 40,000 people in his event. I mean,
right.
and people were okay with that.
Yeah. And look, online events are way bigger than physical events. I mean, one of my companies, we normally had 1,000 people to the dealer meeting. We got 5,000, and the interaction was terrific. I did the night before New York closed. I was in New York, supposed to give a speech the next day. Got called off. I went home. 3 weeks later, we did it virtually. They got 250 new ideas, and they used Zoom breakout rooms to shove people together. And I was popping from room to room. It works. So we're not going back. I don't know if it'll be a hologram, but I have friends who are doing that. So I think things aren't going to change. We have to break down the silos in our business, realize that the key today in business, I think, is using big data to organize around the customer. Look at Ant Financial. They're getting whacked by the Chinese, but before they did, they spun out. They're sort of the PayPal of China. They spun out of Alibaba, and then they started saying, well, we have these customer relationships. Why don't we become a bank? Why don't we become an insurance company? Why don't we become a loan company? All focused around the customer instead of being focused around the product. Because that's what Amazon does. They just grow around their customer relationship. And that's how we survived at Travelocity. So understanding the core customer, having the data there about that customer, then it's, well, what can I bring to them? And that's breaking down the silos in your business and saying, we're all in around the customer. Now, what are we going to do?
Yeah, and I love that as kind of one of the final thoughts of the interview. I mean, that's the number one problem that people are running into right now is they are going product centric. Like you said, I mean, we've seen so many amazing products never even sell a single, copy of their book
Unit. Yeah.
or a physical product. And it's because they're like, oh, I have this amazing thing. Who wants it? Instead of employing what you're talking about, having an audience and just adjusting and giving them more of what they need.
Exactly. And what's amazing today is that cloud-based products, even physical ones, give you so much customer information. I mean, we had tremendous customer information at Travelocity, obviously, because we're watching people online all the time. We invented Fare Watcher. The fare, you've looked at LA 3 times, all of a sudden the fare falls. You get an email, said, hey, here's the low fare. No physical travel agent ever did that. It was easy because we could watch. But look at John Deere today. Instead of waiting for the annual meeting to hear from the dealer what the dealer thinks the farmer's doing with the tractor, they can watch the tractor every day. And they do. I talked to a bank who just said, we shortened every transaction, agricultural bank, every transaction to less than 6 minutes. And I said, well, what got you to do that? He said, that's how long it takes a tractor to get from one end of the field to the other. Because these guys are online, they got nothing to do. So they're trading, corn, and they're doing their banking transactions. They said if they lose the transaction at the end, then they're going to choose a bank that does it better. So you have to understand every customer is connected, and you're fighting for the edge. And the edge today is this device, your phone, right, or the computer, and you have to own that edge. And if you don't own the edge, somebody else will.
I have a belief that when an idea hits your head, it hits 5 other people's heads at the same time. And it's like, it's a race to see who can get it out there faster.
Yeah, always true. Always true.
So Terry, I have 2 final questions for you. And the first one, I mean, obviously, if you've been listening to this interview, you understand that Terry's information is just absolute gold. So where can they consume more of your information, Terry?
Well, tbjones.com is my website, and there are lots and lots of videos there of speeches I've made. My books, Disruption Off and On Innovation, are available on Amazon, and they're in paperback and Kindle and audiobook. So if you like podcasts, you probably like audiobooks. And they're unusual books. Both of them are 72 3-page chapters. It's short form media. It's a cookbook. You can read it front to back to front, pick it up. And a lot of people just keep it on their desk and use it as a manual of how to deal with disruption or how to be more innovative. So tbjones.com, best way to learn more about me.
Love that. So go check that out at tbjones.com. I will also add that link in the show notes as well. So make sure you go over and check out that. I mean, he has so much really free or just very, very cheap information. Go check
Yep.
it out. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that people are paying hundreds of thousands, if not millions of
Well,
dollars.
if you'd like to pay more, you can hire me as a speaker.
There you
And
go.
I'd be
Yeah.
happy to do
Bust
that.
out that wallet, baby.
Yeah, yeah, because you're going to have that event this year. It's not going to be in person for many months. I keep looking at the vaccination lists, and they keep moving them around, and it's going to take a while. So think about having that virtual meeting because they work exceptionally well, and you can put one together in a week. It's
Yeah.
not doesn't take 6 months and negotiating with the hotel and everybody flying there. Just do it.
Yeah. Love that. So make sure you take advantage of that. And then Terry, I have one final question for you. So the question is, we've covered a lot of different topics in this interview. So if you could leave one final parting piece of guidance for everybody saying, hey, if this is the one takeaway they could get from this interview, what would you hope that would be?
I really think that it's about failure. That failure isn't the end of the road, and you just fail small, experiment, change. Look, my son was working in electronic arts. He's a game developer, and he left and formed a company with four guys. Now, how do they compete against a $250 million game, right? Well, their office was their apartment. Their money was from Kickstarter. They outsourced the things they didn't need. They used the cloud for IT, right? And they built a great game, and it sold about $500,000. That was fine, but not enough to sustain a company. And they were burned out. So did Ben fail? No, he got a much better job immediately because people said, "How the hell did you build that game?" And now he's gotten promoted again, and now he's at a company that just sold to Microsoft for $8 billion. So failure doesn't close the door. Failure teaches us a lot if you're willing to let it. So learn, experiment, and pivot if you have to, but deploy these new technologies, read disruption off. It'll help you figure out how to make those decisions and deal with disruption in a way where you use it as your weapon and it isn't used against you.